If you pay attention to the different stories the Gospels tell about Jesus, you will notice that he often says and does things that his disciples do not expect. And today's Gospel is a good example of this. Jesus and his disciples are walking through the grounds of the beautiful and elegant Jerusalem temple. And they're admiring its stonework, these massive Herodian ashlars. And as they're admiring the stonework, Jesus predicts its destruction. Now, when Jesus does this, his disciples quickly ask when this will happen, because they want to know when this will happen so they can be out of town when it does happen. But Jesus ignores their question. And instead, he warns them, life is hard. He says, expect wars, expect plagues, famines. Life can be hard. If you have the courage to be his follower, Jesus warns us that life can be hard. Expect confrontation, because the new life that he is bringing is coming into a world that is opposed to that life. And so if we are going to be his followers, we have to expect ridicule and opposition, and in some places even arrest. Now here's the strange thing about this conversation Jesus has with his disciples. There's a direct connection between Jesus' prediction of the destruction of the Jerusalem temple and our ability to deal with life's difficulties. Let me say that again. There is a direct connection between Jesus' shocking prediction that the temple of Jerusalem would be destroyed and our ability as his disciples to deal with life's hardships. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But first, I want you to consider how our middle-class American life is filled with images and stories about how things are going to keep getting better and better and easier because technology is improving, medicine is improving. This is the great myth of progress that we just grow up with. It's in our Cheerios, it's in the air we breathe as Americans, and somehow it's tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average or the unemployment rate. There are even some Christians who believe that if by coming to church regularly and being a good Catholic, they will somehow have a good life. In fact, they deserve a good life. But Jesus warns us, life is hard. Life is difficult. There will be times when you will be alone and overwhelmed. There will be job loss and breakups of relationships and illness. And death too will come. Now this is where Jesus' prediction of the destruction of the temple comes in. You know, there could be no more shocking statement that a Jew could utter. The Jerusalem temple was the holy center of Israel, functioning for 1,000 years. It was the religious, the political, and the economic center of the country. Jerusalem was also the place where heaven and earth touched. It's the place of the holy presence. Imagine, as an American Catholic, if you could combine the White House, the Capitol, and the Vatican all in one place, and then predict their destruction. You would get some feel for how shocking it is that Jesus predicted the destruction of the Jerusalem temple. Now here's the question. If Jesus thought the place of the holy, the place where heaven and earth touch, would be destroyed, where would they receive forgiveness? Where would the people gather and experience God's restoration? Where would God fulfill God's promises? Since the prophets always predicted they would all happen in Jerusalem. That is, until Jesus started gathering God's people, That is until Jesus started healing God's people and forgiving them and bringing God's power into their lives. Jesus went around Jerusalem doing what Israel expected God to do one day in the temple. He gathered disciples, and especially at his last meal, he and his gathered disciples became the new place where the holy was to be found. And by doing so, the holy became mobile. It was no longer stuck in Jerusalem. Wherever Jesus appeared, the holy appeared. Now, when he rose from the dead, the place of the holy could be found wherever Christians gathered, including right here in Silver Spring, Maryland at St. John the Baptist. Now I want you to listen. I want you to listen to what Jesus tells you. I will be with you always. Because he is risen, he can be with us always. Whether you are sick or healthy, I am with you. When you graduate or whether you fail, I am with you, Jesus says. When you are lost and empty and lonely, I am with you. As you embark on new adventures, face loss, breathe your last breath, Jesus tells us, I am with you. Even when all you feel is hurt and emptiness and no sense of hope, I am always with you. Even when you don't notice me, like the disciples on the road to Emmaus, I am with you. Now I want you to remind you in closing that we are Jesus' disciples. We are his body. We are the community that knows and experiences his presence, his company. We are the ones who know that he has been with us always. And he sends us out to accompany those who are hurt and lost and lonely. And here's the important thing. Most of the time, people discover that Jesus is with them by our being with them. Most of the time, people discover and hear Jesus saying, I am with you, by our being with them. As people who know his presence, we are sent out to be his presence to others. My prayer is that we become the presence of Jesus to others. Lord knows our world needs it. Amen.